Good day, everyone, and welcome to Jack 15 Purposive Communication. For this week's lesson, we're going to discuss about communication processes, principles, models, and ethics. But before we proceed, I have a profound question, and that is, how should we communicate to people across cultures? We'll find the answers as we go along. So come and let's learn. These are the objectives of our lesson. 1. Discuss the definition, principles, process, and importance of communication. 2. Differentiate the diverse models of communication. 3. Examine the functions and types of nonverbal communication. 4. Determine the different barriers of effective communication. And number 5, enumerate the ethics of written and verbal communication in various cultural and multicultural contexts. Let's begin with the definition of communication. And the question is, what is your own definition of communication? Let's take a look at the videos.
Communications are daily activity and it involves nonverbal or verbal communication.
Communication is about sending or receiving information.
My own definition of communication is to send and receive information.
Communication is a connection with yourself to the people around you personally and virtually.
Communication is a way for people to build a strong relationship.
Communication is a direct way to relay information.
Communication is a medium we use to understand each other.
Let's proceed now to the principles of communication. And the question is, what principle of communication do you usually employ in your daily conversations and why? Let's take a look.
Principle of clarity. The message of what you're talking about must be understandable.
Being clear so that my receiver could understand it right away.
I usually employ the principle of clarity because I want my receiver to understand what I mean to say.
Principle of informality because it is more comfortable talking to someone informally.
Principle of attention because it helps us to build strong relationships.
I choose the principle of clarity because I'd like to make them understand what I feel.
Principle of clarity because I want my receiver to understand what I want to deliver.
If you're going to communicate, make use of Grice's maxims, and these are, number 1, the maxim of quality, which means that you have to be truthful as much as possible. Followed by the maxim of quantity, which means that you have to be informative as much as possible, not too lengthy and not too short. Followed by the maxim of relation, which means that what you say or what you speak should be relevant to the topic at hand. Followed by the maxim of manner, which means that you have to be clear as much as possible. And that's Grice's maxim. And always remember, express, not to impress. Let's proceed now to the process of communication. And the question now is, in the process of communication, what is the most significant part and why?
The sender develops the idea to be sent. There's no communication if there's no idea or topic from the sender.
Encoding because this is the way to relay the idea or message.
The most significant part in communication is the feedback because it is the signal when the recipient receives the message.
The message because there will be no conversation happen if there's no message.
Medium of transmission because this part will be the center part of communication.
For me, it is the message because you wouldn't be able to start a conversation without it.
The sender encodes the message because it's important to properly encode the message to the receiver.
This is now the communication process, which begins with a stimulus wherein it ignites for a communication to happen, followed by the ideation wherein it occurs in the mind of the communicator on how he or she would communicate, and then followed by encoding wherein it's the moment when he speaks or she writes or whatever manner that the communicator would send his or her message, and then followed by the transmission wherein it's the channel, whether it's written, spoken, or it could be through mobile phone or through laptop or whatever, and then followed by the reception wherein it's now the turn of the receiver or the listener. If it's spoken communication, then the receptor neurons of the listener would be activated. For example, you are now listening, and or if it's written, then you're using your eyes, and then followed by decoding wherein through the words that you hear or through the words that you're reading, they would form messages, and then followed by the understanding. So the words there would create a concept for you to understand the message, and then followed by a feedback or a form of response. Right, let's proceed now to the relevance of communication. And the question now is, what is the relevance of human communication? Let's take a look at the videos.
Is for us to understand one another through communication.
It becomes the way to express feelings, ideas, and thoughts.
The relevance of human communication is it made us united.
Communication helps people to understand each other and share information.
Human communication helps humans to function productively.
I think its importance is to make people understand what you feel or think towards them.
It is relevant in a way that the sender and the receiver share the same mindset.
Communication is very important because if we do not communicate, then we won't be able to create relationships and our identity. For example, our social identity as Filipinos or as members of a minority group. Let's proceed now to the models of communication. In your experience, what communication model do you frequently use and why? Let's take a look at the videos.
Shannon Weaver model. There's always a noise interrupting the conversation.
Interactional model because I often interact with people based on personality traits and behavior.
I frequently use the interactional model of communication because it has a feedback.
Interactional model for me to know if my message was delivered clearly according to its feedback.
Shannon Weaver model because I used to send and receive information daily.
I often use the Osgood Schramm model because I like to receive their feedback and discuss about it.
Shannon Weaver model because it can cause misunderstanding due to the noise.
Alright, I'm going to show you the different models of communication. Let's begin with the linear model of communication. If it's so linear, it follows a straight path. Okay? And then it begins with the sender is sending the message, and then the message is received by the receiver. And take note, there's no response because it's linear. Then followed by Aristotle's model. It's just like your linear model, however, it's used in public communication. And take note, there is also an effect. Alright, up next, Lasswell's model. Lasswell's model is just like your linear model because it follows a straight path and there is no response. However, take note that there is an effect. Alright, next is Shannon and Weaver's mathematical model. In this particular model, it tries to look into what is the best transmitter. Have you noticed that there are spots in the Philippines or maybe in your area wherein there's a poor signal? Okay, so in that case, this mathematical model is very much applicable. Then followed by Newcomb's model. In this particular model, it tries to neutralize social relationship because as you can see, there's this A and B, and A and B are in conflict with each other. And so that A and B would be alright, we need a mediator in the form of X. So we need another person as the mediator. Another one is Osgood and Schramm model of communication. And this is now a cycle because here the speaker encodes the message and then the listener decodes the message, interprets the message, and then the listener before now becomes the sender of the message. So the listener now encodes the message and then the speaker before now becomes a listener. So decodes the message and then interprets and so on. And then followed by Westley and MacLean's model. This particular model is used in mass communication. For example, before the report of the reporter or a writer would reach the audience or the readers, there is an editor who would check the grammar and the veracity of facts and other technicalities of the report. Followed by Berlo's model of communication. In this particular model, it tells us that there are different factors for a communication to happen. And these are communication skills. It could be how you speak and how you listen, followed by your attitude towards a topic or towards a person you're talking to, followed by the knowledge. If you are knowledgeable about this certain topic, then you could say a lot about this particular topic. And if you are listening to a topic which you are not knowledgeable about, then you would just be in quandary because you won't be able to understand at all. And then followed by social system. The social system refers to our relationship towards other people. And then culture that refers to our practices. And then the message, and by the way, there are 5 channels here. You have seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting. So that's Berlo's model of communication. Followed by Barnlund's transactional model, and it tells us that speaking and listening happen at the same time. And then last but not the least, Dance's Helical model. It tells us that communication is a complex process. It begins with a single topic, and then you move to another topic, such that it forms a helix, just like the one on the screen. Alright, let's proceed now to nonverbal communication. And the question now is, what is the most unique nonverbal communication that you employ? Let's take a look at the videos.
Usually, I give my smiles to people to greet or to show respect.
If I feel awkward or angry, I cross my arms.
This means agree, I'm fine, or good job.
Gestures, it helps a person to express the message through different action.
For me, it is eye contact because it intimidates people, making them pay attention to you.
By the way, there are different functions of nonverbal communication, and these are, number 1, complementing, which means that what you speak and what you act are the same. For example, you say, hello. So I'm saying hello at the same time, I wave my hand. Next is conflicting. For example, you would say, I'm okay, but take note, your paralanguage is different. You're saying you're okay, but you are not actually okay. Followed by substituting, wherein it's a replacement. So instead of saying hello, you would just maybe wave your hand or raise your eyebrows like this. And then followed by accenting, wherein if you want to emphasize a thing, for example, if you're going to deliver a speech, you try to maximize the volume if you want to emphasize a point or you want to emphasize this particular word. And then followed by regulating, wherein it tells us that there will be no interruptions because you know how to turn take. Let's proceed now to the different types of nonverbal communication. The first one here is Kinesics, which refers to your body movements. Another one here is Oculesics, wherein you use your eyes. For example, that's yes. Or maybe you have glowing eyes because you're very happy or you're very excited. So your eyes would actually speak. Because as they say, your eyes are the windows of your soul. Let's proceed now to proxemics. If you say proxemics, that refers to distance. So for example, if you are very much close with this person, so you are intimate, or you have this close relationship with this person. However, if you distance yourself, then more or less you're not close with that person. Another one is haptics. Haptics that refers to touch. And take note, there are different meanings of touches. For example, there is this friendly touch, a tap, or maybe a loving touch, a hug, or maybe you do high five. That's a form of haptics. Or maybe shake hands. That's also a form of haptics. Alright, let's proceed now to paralanguage. Your paralanguage refers to your change in intonation, pitch, and the rate of your voice. For example, if your mother is angry, you would know. Or if your mother is happy, you would also know. Or you would be able to understand the meaning by just listening to how they speak. Alright? Followed by the objectics. In the objectics, you would be able to know, for example, how the way they dress, whether this person is poor or rich. You can also say the profession of this particular person by just looking at the way how they dress. For example, engineer, so they're wearing the hard hat, of a doctor, just like Dr. Mike, or maybe a professor or a banker or a bank teller or a nurse or anybody by just looking at their outfit. Followed by chronemics, that refers to time. For example, for us Filipinos, our concept of time is 1 hour late or beyond. Or if you're American, then you are on time. But if you are German, then more or less you are 10 minutes earlier. Followed by olfactics, and that refers to smell. You would know what's the food being served by your mother by just judging the smell. You would also know the perfume of your friend by just, of course, smelling him or her, or maybe a body odor. You would know. Let's proceed now to barriers of communication. The question now is, what is the worst communication barrier and why?
Language barrier, because if you don't know what language he or she is using, you won't understand each other.
Perceptual barrier because perceiving message depends on the beliefs of each side.
The worst communication barrier is language barrier because the receiver cannot decode the message.
I think it's language barriers because it's difficult to understand unfamiliar words.
Language because it can frustrate communication.
I think it is the language barrier because you wouldn't be able to understand what they speak.
Language barrier, since the sender and the receiver are speaking, they might not understand each other because they don't have the same language.
And these are the different barriers to effective communication. Let's begin now with physical barrier. As you can see on the picture, there is this barrier which is a glass. And that glass there serves as a physical barrier. Another one is physiological barrier. For example, if you are sick, like you have a headache, stomach ache, or whatever ache you have. Another one is psychological barrier. For example, if you have a problem, then you won't be able to listen carefully to the lessons of your professors. Another one here is language barrier, and this is a very huge barrier. Why? Because if you're speaking different languages, then you won't be able to understand. So that's why you have to make use of a lingua franca or a common language which both communicators know how to speak and understand. Followed by cultural barrier. Among the Japanese, their greetings is through bowing, so with the Koreans. But for us, our greetings is through a form of maybe shake hands in the professional world. But among your friends, maybe you have a different form of greeting. For example, you have a different high five or maybe shake hands or whatever, something like that. Then followed by gender barrier. It's a barrier because women tend to talk about fashion, cosmetics, beauty products, clothes. For the men, they talk more of sports, recreation, adventures, vehicles, motor parts, or whatever. Next is interpersonal barrier. And this is a barrier because you tend not to communicate to people whom you are not close to or to strangers. Next is perceptual barrier. This barrier is very much relevant because we have different viewpoints. And in that case, we have to respect the viewpoints of others because that's a form of understanding. And then last but not the least is the ethics of communication. And the question now is, employing the ethics of communication, how should you communicate in the physical world? Let's take a look at the videos.
When you speak in the physical world, you must respect boundaries, don't interrupt, listen, and understand.
Communication with respect to other factors such as location.
In communicating in the physical world, I always provide feedback.
Be an active listener, be honest, and speak non-judgmentally.
By using nonverbal communication properly while communicating.
I think it is necessary to understand what is the message so that you could give the necessary feedback.
Communicate in a way that speakers should be responsible and it should be balanced between speaking and listening.
How about in the virtual world?
Communicate online with respect, honesty, fairness, and be responsible.
Communicating that tolerates virtual and online barriers.
In communicating in the online world, I turn off my camera and microphone if it is not needed.
Respect each other's posts and be responsible posting online.
Respect them and take the group's emotional temperature.
You should use appropriate language with respect and consideration so that people would also respect you.
Communicate virtually by keeping the privacy of the speaker or the listener, and it should be remain confidential.
Always remember, guys, that if we're going to communicate, we have to take note of their background, their culture, race, ethnicity, age, profession, so that we would be able to promote world peace at the same time understanding. And by the way, we should not impose our culture and our upbringing because we are not promoting the ethics of communication. If you got questions regarding this lesson or you got queries of any concern, drop an email at f.rene.bonifacio@cmu.edu.ph. I'll attend to your queries as fast as I can. If it's your first time to watch this video, kindly click the subscribe button for you to be updated with the latest videos of our course. And as always, God bless and stay healthy.